It began around 2015, and I noticed a young man outside the LBC offices in Leicester Square, and I noticed him 3 days running. Now, that could just be coincidence, somebody who's a fan of LBC, whatever it was. But I did notice him 3 times. And then towards the end of the week in which I had noticed him 3 times, I then saw him on the same train as me. And then on the Friday of that week, I was going in a different direction on the same train line, and he was on that train too. So I started to think,
this is odd.
This is odd.
Yeah.
But I was, obviously that was a case of a physical, visible stalker, potentially. And the following week, I established in my own mind that he was following me by stopping suddenly in the road as I was walking and seeing if and acting as though I just needed to check something, and he was right behind me. And I thought, yep, this guy's following me. So I got the police involved very quickly from the point I thought, right, I'm being stalked here.
And you're in a happy position of being able to use members of your own family too.
For advice. I have two brothers and a sister-in-law who are police officers and a brother who's a lawyer, and they advised me straight away to call the Met. And the Met were great. The Met were on it very quickly with me. I had a visit from a police officer the next day to my house who laid out. I mean, I know a lot more about stalking law now than I did then and harassment. But they held my hand through the process very early on and said, what do you want to do? And because the person presented as somebody with some problems, developmental problems, at the very least, I took it for too long, actually. I took it as a welfare issue for that person rather than for me for a time. But that changed. And eventually, after repeated encroachment, up to and including coming to my home, even though there had been police interventions and harassment orders, a kind of pre-stalking protection order, he appeared at my home one Sunday, and that was it for me. All bets were off. And that there was then a case in a magistrate's court. And
he was literally standing outside your door?
At the bottom of the gates that steps to my house, yeah. And he knew that I knew his identity, by the way, quite early on. He knew that I knew he was stalking me. He'd been warned off by police. He'd been warned off by his parents, a social worker, and he continued to do it for almost 3 years. And eventually...
Don't get me wrong, but you are a strong woman.
Yes.
How much effect did this have on you?
Well, my own story of myself being a strong woman, and I am, but strong people can be victims of crime, I learnt, and they can feel the impact of that crime as easily as anybody else. And it encroached on me very slowly because I took a position that it was about his welfare to start with, and then that switched quite obviously.
But it must have preyed on you sort of month by month.
It did, and life was very busy at the time, so I put him mentally and low in the pecking order, but that didn't stop it impact on me. And actually, interestingly, when the case was over and I had got a satisfactory outcome, about 2 weeks after that, I woke up a few times in the middle of the night, very suddenly, and I'm a good sleeper, and I just woke up very suddenly thinking there was somebody in my room. So that was, in a sense, the psychology of it.
Grinds you down, yes. So I was absolutely astonished by the number of people who are victims of stalking, and I'd just like to ask you about that and your reaction to what's happened today, because that is a big move, isn't it?
Yeah,
to give everybody...
I'm in favour of everything that's been announced today. I think it's all very good and it's all very strong. How much of it is quickly deliverable is another question, but I don't think they're shying away from that. It's not an overnight thing, this. I think, as to the frequency of it, it's, as you said, you've given the figures there, it's very common. But there are also very predictable types of stalking, and there are more serious types of stalking than others, if you see what I mean. So the most serious type would be predatory stalkers, people like Levi Belfield, Yorkshire Ripper. Then you've got relationship stalkers, very threatening, often ending in violence or killing.
That after a
relationship breakup, however long that relationship is, it can be very brief and still be very violent if somebody is, or threats of violence. Things like threatening to kill themselves should be seen as a threat against you rather than the other way around. These are known patterns that have been examined and studied. And then there are vengeful stalkers who the tiniest slight can turn somebody into a stalker if they've got the capacity to be a stalker. So somebody who just takes offence at something you said to them or whatever it was, they can spend... I spoke to a chap who was a DJ, the man who stalked him for 17 years and tried to destroy his character, his professional life, was offended because he didn't play the record he asked him to play. It can be that crazy. And the stalker that I think I had would fall into the category of inadequate suitor, somebody who thinks there's a relationship there of some sort and there isn't. And
here's your voice in their ear.
Well, that's where mine originated from, for sure. So that's the types that are out there. And it can be all kinds of relationships as well. It can be adoptive children who find their parents and one side says, no thanks, I don't want to pursue this, and the other will stalk them and things. It's all kinds of permutations.
Yes, very complicated.
But I think the thing with the announcement today, as well as the stalking protection orders and people knowing who their stalker is, which I think is vital for their safety, I think police training is vital as well.